I'm being reminded I need to eat the microphone. So can you all hear me? Yes? Okay, great. Good. Welcome, welcome. Do you have the clicker thingy? Oh, just the, okay. Here we are. It is Holy Week. Today is, yes, what a joyous morning to gather with so many out at the sundial and to have that feeling. It really was that feeling for me of what must it have been to be in that initial procession and to be waving palms and then to end up in the place where we did. So we are being invited into liturgical living in a particular way this week. So if you want to hit the next slide, the liturgical calendar, our middle child was doing an experiment this past week with a pine cone and water, and he laid out a green napkin beneath everything, and he said, "It is God's long green growing season." So this is both a shout out to Boykin and the ways in which Children's Chapel is forming our children to know the liturgical seasons, and also a reminder to us to think about the ways in which we keep time. There is Chronos time, the time that's on our watch, the time that'll have us looking, when do we need to go out to the sundial for the 11:15? And there is Kairos time, there is God's time that we mark liturgically. And I like the image on your left that shows, it's like a twisty slide or a spiral staircase. I feel like the liturgical year is like an auger, right? And so it's always going around and around, but it is drawing us deeper and deeper and deeper. And we're doing the same thing, and yet we're always turning up new soil. There is always some new work that God is doing in us. So we are here. You can go to the next slide. We've been in Lent. Ash Wednesday, we burned the palms that had come from the year before. We combined them with sweet-smelling oil. We ground them up, and we reminded ourselves with the imposition of cross on foreheads of our fundamental and essential identity. God's beloved children, utterly reliant on God and God's mercy. That's for me, as the ash flutters into eyelashes and eyebrows, that's what I remember and think about. And then today we find ourselves on Palm Sunday, the Sunday of the Passion. Who was at the 9? Yeah, okay, so a lot of people at the 9. What did we do? We waved our palms. We processed. We received the sacrament. And we heard again the story, this time from Luke's Gospel, of Jesus' Passion. So ably narrated by Ray, thank you, who is here among us. So Palm Sunday does for us several things at once. It takes us from the triumphant processional entry into Jerusalem all the way through what will happen on Good Friday. So we kind of bump back in time on Maundy, Thursday, when we come to the institution of the Lord's Supper, the washing of feet, Jesus' last meal with his disciples, and then proceed again on Good Friday, hearing the Passion, and then to the Easter Vigil. So we do a little bit of a time warp liturgically. Are you picking up now? Okay. So the Triduum is one service. It encompasses Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday. So you will notice that we'll have one leaflet that will run from Thursday through the vigil. So don't take your leaflet with you on Thursday. Leave it in your pew. Don't take it on Friday. Leave it in your pew. You'll also notice there are not dismissals at the end of liturgies on Thursday and on Friday. So they feel sort of, I think they feel strange a little bit. It's like, did we end? Are we finished? Are we done yet? And we're not. We're not. We carry through to the first Eucharist of Easter, which takes place at the Vigil. So Maundy Thursday, we will hear about Jesus' act of love, the ways in which we inhabit the mandatum, the commandment to love one another. And one of the ways in which that happens, one of the ways in which we make that manifest liturgically, is in foot washing. But I have to turn my mind back to our gospel from last week, when Jesus' feet were washed with Mary's hair, and he was anointed with nard. It's almost a prefiguring of that foot washing that we will have, and of his body being anointed for the tomb. So Maundy Thursday, we remember Jesus, that meal that he had with his disciples, the way in which he lovingly washed their feet and cared for them. And on that night, Jesus is betrayed. One of his disciples quietly leaves. And it is when we quietly leave God, that is a reminder of that act of betrayal of Judas. And so what we do collectively liturgically is to remember, what must it have been like that night to suddenly have political adversaries about, to suddenly be needing to clean up what you had just shared with Jesus. So we strip the altar. We do it reverently but deliberately and with some alacrity to remind ourselves of that night. And we take with us the consecrated bread, the light that hangs over the ambry, representing the real light and real presence of Jesus. And we take it to what we call an altar of repose. And this year we will construct it again out in the cloister. And some of our altar guild members do a tremendous job of creating a garden on a table and reminding us of the places where Jesus went to pray, where he invited his disciples to wait with him. And so too, we, as we leave Maundy Thursday and walk outside into the cloister, will be invited to stay with Jesus in his presence, to remain with him. The mic pass off.
So as Elizabeth Marie was describing how today's service ended with the reading of the Passion Gospel and how that's a bit of a time warp, part of the reason I think that happens is because there was a time when what was happening in church was happening for the whole village, and so nothing else was happening during Holy Week. But many of us will be in lots of different places during Holy Week. Some of us will be here and be able to keep watch and vigil and participate in some of the liturgies, but some folks aren't always able to be here for those services. So part of why our Palm Sunday liturgy has come to incorporate that reading of the Passion so dramatically is to invite people into Holy Week even if they can't be here for all of the days. So on Good Friday, we go to the day of that drama of Jesus' accusation and trial, and the back and forth between Pilate and Herod, and who is responsible for what this man has been doing and saying, and the crowd's participation in that. So Good Friday is the day that we step into that drama. We do that in a couple of ways. Rather than having that back and forth dramatic presentation of the gospel, we will actually hear that gospel chanted from the Gospel of John in our Book of Common Prayer service for Good Friday. In some settings, not here at the Chapel of the Cross recently, but in some settings, there's actually a 3-hour service on Good Friday that marks those 3 hours of Jesus being on the cross. And in those settings, there might be 7 sermons, each sermon based on the 7 sort of last phrases and words that Jesus spoke from the cross. There might be stations of the cross that happen in different places, which is walking through the 14 stops along the way of that story. So there's different ways that groups and communities embody or enact that drama on Good Friday. Here you'll be able to have the opportunity to walk the Stations of the Cross at 4 p.m. if you would like to come back or come to church at that time. But at noon, we'll do the Book of Common Prayer observance, and that will include, as I mentioned, rather than reading the gospel, we will actually have a chanted version of the Gospel of John. And one of the things to be mindful of and aware of as we're hearing that gospel and as living as sort of Christians in the modern world is to also remember and understand that at times in Christian history, the words of our gospel texts have been used to turn attention and attitudes and behaviors against the Jews as described or as sort of heard. And if you're looking just black and white on the pages, you might see that and understand how people might have sort of taken that as a way to turn against entire people. But one of the things that we want to be mindful of and turn our attention to is that we're really talking about the religious leadership and folks within the community that were worried about what was happening to their community. It was not the everybody, the everyday person. It was not entire groups of people. It was leaders who were battling for power, again, between that sort of back and forth between Pilate and Herod and the authorities within the temple, because Jesus was getting attention and was getting followers. And so just want to name that that's a concern that I think as Christian preachers and as Christians, we want to remember that history, that Christians have sometimes used those words in ways to justify things that are unjustifiable and that are not Christian. But we will hear that gospel and we will hear those words, and they are followed by a set of antiphonal prayers between the deacon leading a version of the prayers of the people for our community and collects that are read by the priest. And in addition to that, I don't know how recently it was introduced, if it was under your leadership or if it was prior to that, the veneration of the cross. We'll take, yes? So for several years here at the Chapel of the Cross, there's been an opportunity to, on Good Friday, for there to be a large cross that the individual participants may, either from your seats or by actually standing up and walking forward, may have the opportunity to have a veneration or an opportunity to give reverence to the cross. Some people will do that with a simple nod in the presence. Some people may even, reach out and touch the cross. Some people may prostrate themselves and kind of have a full moment in that time and space. So know that there's another unique way of us being invited to embody and engage with this story on Good Friday in the context of our liturgy. That is then followed by a distribution of communion. It is not a celebration of the communion act. We will not do the great Thanksgiving and lift up our hearts the way that we would normally be familiar with. There will be a distribution of the communion, and we will attempt to distribute and complete consumption of all of the communion that is all of the reserved sacrament that is available in our setting. So all of the bread that has been kept in reserve in the Ambri, bread that we might use during the week if we needed to bring communion to someone who is sick, or if we had more people in church than expected and we need to pull a little bit out to kind of finish communion, we will attempt to completely empty the Ambri and consume all of that either with those who are gathered, or we as the clergy will consume and complete that consumption, and then we will extinguish the candle that shows the presence of that reserved sacrament in our space. So the same candle that is kept lit while we have reserved sacrament in the church, the same candle that was processed out for the Garden of Repose and keeps vigil with that sacrament, once all of it has been consumed, we will extinguish that candle and have a silent departure from the space. And what that's enacting for us, what that's inviting us to know and to experience and to sit with, is the emptying of the world of Christ's presence with us. Now, physically, we are nourished by the sacrament. We are going to, in our consumption of that, we will have Christ with us. Christ can never truly be separated from us. But liturgically, practicing as a community, walking through that day of Good Friday, it's calling us into that depth that Jesus went into death, that there was a loss. Again, calling back to the sermon from last Sunday about, Jesus experiencing the loss of Lazarus alongside of Martha and Mary. We are called to experience that loss along with his disciples. And we experience that all through Good Friday into Holy Saturday. On Holy Saturday, everyone that had that loss on Friday wakes up, and Jesus is still gone. This is an image, I think it's called waiting. And this is sort of all of Jesus' closest followers who have just gone through these intense experience of this, this special meal and this foot washing, and then they have witnessed his death on the cross and the removal of his body. What do we do now? So there's a very brief liturgy that happens in the churchyard at 10 a.m. It's probably from 10 to 10:20 or 10:30 at the most. And it's just a reading of the word and a naming of, this is a moment of sitting in that acceptance of grief, that sitting with the disciples who didn't know what was next, and waiting and wondering. If you come back to church at 8 o'clock on Saturday night, you have the opportunity to participate in the best church of the year. Better than Easter Day. Easter Day is great. The Great Easter Vigil is better. It can happen at 8 p.m. or later in the evening on a Saturday night after sunset. Thank you. It can happen before sunrise on a Sunday morning, and there are churches and communities, and I know I've enjoyed wonderful experiences of getting up really early in the morning to do some long church and watch for the sunrise. The things that happen liturgically at the Great Easter Vigil include the lighting of a fire. So one of the candles that we use in the church on certain days of the year and in certain seasons is called our Paschal candle. And that candle is what's processed during baptisms. That candle comes out on Pentecost, and it's probably lit for the whole season of Easter. It sits out for those 50 days. There's other specific All Saints and other days during the year when we pull that specific candle out. Well, the old candle is put away. Ours is a reusable candle, but the old candle has been extinguished, and a new candle is lit. A new fire is lit, and so there are special prayers and chanted prayers or spoken prayers when we light that candle, all about how we have been in the darkness and a new light is coming. And so not only is there a great little bonfire moment and the lighting of this Paschal candle, but that candle, the light of Christ, thanks be to God, that candle passes through the congregation and brings us all into, having our own individual candle and light to help us through this dark night. The waiting and wondering is almost through, but we're still just these little individual lights lit off of the bigger candle. And we hold those lights through a set of readings and sort of antiphonal readings and songs that go back and forth that tell our salvation history. So they take us all the way back to creation. They take us back to the prophets of the Old Testament. They take us through some of, there's several readings to choose from. I think there's 9 to choose from. We probably do 4 or 5 of them, and there's some liturgical opportunity there to kind of pick and choose those. But we tell these stories to take us back to that campfire, to take us back to that darkness as we're making our way through this long night. This is also a night in the church here when we can traditionally do baptisms, and if there were a bishop visitation or a bishop with us, we could offer confirmations. And we will have some wonderful baptisms happening at the Easter Vigil this year. So that will be very exciting. And even if there wasn't a baptism, it's an opportunity for the whole community to also renew our vows, our baptismal vows. So that is a part of that liturgy as well. And then something really, really exciting happens. I don't know if there's a noise. There's no other slide. But at a certain point, all of the lights of the church come up, and the church is decorated and ready for Easter. The first Eucharist of Easter is in the context of the Great Easter Vigil. So we vigil all the way up to that transition, and it is Easter. At night, we have to turn all the lights up and light a bunch of candles, and everyone has their individual candles can be extinguished because we have all of the lights of the church are back up. In the morning, if we were doing it as a sunrise service, the sun is what brings that light into the room. You sort of try and time your liturgy as best you can so that as the lights come up, you're slowly seeing the new day dawn. And that new day is the day of resurrection. So on the Great Easter Vigil, we celebrate the first Eucharist of Easter. All big music, like I said, best church of the year, so come on out. It's really worth it. And you can come back for Easter morning as well. That's great too. But that is sort of a few pieces of our liturgy and the way that we're going to enact and invite you into this Triduum, into this 3 days of moving through the story of Jesus with our bodies, with our prayers, with our voices, and with each other. In what way has this liturgy been made unique to Chapel of the Cross?
That's a very good question, Carol. I would think in some ways the particularities of it are in that liturgy is the work of the people, so that each Easter Vigil is particular in who comes, in who is present, and in who is offering their prayers. There may be musical variations that you'll make from year to year that you may be wanting to echo or amplify, things that are happening in the world, things that are happening in our community. But so it's like the augur. We're approaching the same liturgy again, but with newness that is in us and with newness in a different constellation of those who are there in worship.
And I'd like to remind everybody, this will be my third wonderful Holy Week with the Chapel of the Cross. This will be my first Holy Week in person. This will be my first Holy Week where people are in the building. This was my first Palm Sunday here at the Chapel of the Cross with other people. And that is true of many of our community members, and that is true of people who will join us for the first time in Easter and in Eastertide, just as they do join us newly in September for, August and September for the new academic year. So it's not just that the liturgy kind of awakens, but it's a whole new gathering of the body of Christ. Even those of us who've been here for a while. And I'm not the only one for whom this is their first in-person versus online Chapel of the Cross Holy Week. Does anyone want to say what their favorite liturgy is of this time? Are there folks here who have been to some of these liturgies? I would think so, but well, I already gave away my favorite. So here, just for the folks that might not have heard that, connecting with the altar of repose, having that there being some newness to that and some newness to the veneration of the cross, not new in the history of time and liturgy, but newer in the practice and the invitation here. And that's given some new insights even to folks who've had many Holy Weeks in this place, which I think is really helpful.
Speaking of new things, I will experience something new this year that will happen in the context of Holy Week. I had a good friend reach out he's actually a UNC grad. When I worked in Thailand, he was working in Vietnam, and that's where we got to know one another. We've stayed in touch. He has since gone on to become a rabbi. And so he reached out and said, can you help me with a ritual need? And I said, tell me more about this ritual need. Of course, yes, I'd love to help you. And so during Passover, for Jews to keep Passover, they need to remove all of the chametz, all of anything containing leaven. And so this year, for the first time, I'll be entering into a contractual agreement to buy his congregation's chametz so that I will own it during Passover so that they can faithfully observe Passover. And it must be a non-Jew and someone who has, respectable ethical conduct. And so that for me this year, having never done it before, learning about it, and I think David and I are going to try to do some teaching about it for the congregation on a Zoom recorded. It made me think about how do we need one another in terms of interfaith engagement, and how we bolster one another in the deepening practices of our respective faiths. So that's a new thing for me this Holy Week. Yeah. All right. Yeah, Ray. Yes. So Ray's asking about keeping vigil. And so I think it was 2019, we offered vigil in the chapel with the altar of repose. And so I think it was staffed until midnight or 1. Some congregations staff it all the night through. As we have moved the altar of repose outdoors, the cloister area is free to anyone who wants to come during the night to keep watch. So it is there, it is present, it is available, and we're not having a locked door or an unlocked door. It's just there in the cloister. And I like that echo of the garden in which folks waited and wept and felt, all of the things that people felt. So yes, that is, we will move from Maundy, Thursday, strip the altar, take the consecrated sacrament that remains to the altar of repose. There will be vigil that night, and then Good Friday we'll consume the remainder.
I'll share, in my parish that I was growing up in, that we would not have school on Good Friday, and as a youth group, and I'm not suggesting we do this here, but just to say what my experience was, which gave me a real strong sense of Holy Week, was we would have a youth overnight in the building on Maundy, Thursday, and we would sign up for those different hours. Now, this is also where I got to see Jesus Christ Superstar every year on video, on VHS. This is where I saw Godspell, the movie. But different, youth would sign up to make sure that every hour was covered. And there was a tradition in that parish as well of dyeing probably hundreds of eggs red, like the Eastern Orthodox tradition. And our Easter egg hunt was not like pastel eggs filled with candy. It was these red, real eggs, that were, I guess, hopefully outside, hidden in case any of them got lost or left behind. But so the youth would sort of do these different things, and we would have our slumber party. We would get woken up for our hour that we were scheduled. I would always schedule myself for this 5 a.m. hour. This is also in Minnesota, so Easter is not a warm season. Rarely are you not wearing a big parka, but our garden was created indoors in a small space in the nave of, kind of behind the nave of the church. So basically a coat closet, but turned into this incredible garden with plants. And so you had this fragrant room, and you were invited to come and spend that hour. And so I would take the 5 a.m. hour every year. I did it the first year, and I was like, oh, I'm doing this from now on, because the sun would come into the room, and you were just in this room, with flowers, and you were waiting for Jesus. And then the overnight would end with morning prayer at 8 a.m. and then, the church would be getting ready for Good Friday. And God bless our youth minister and our adult volunteers who essentially kept Vigil with us, because they kept us, getting up for our different hour. And members of the parish could come in for that hour as well. But if someone didn't want to come in at 2 or 3 in the morning, we had it covered, essentially. And when I was in New York, we also had a garden of repose, and I lived in the campus of the church that we were at. And so I did go down for the 2 and 3 o'clock hour, and I was like, 5 a.m. is much better.
So, I think you're hearing in some of what Mary Kat's describing, the particular expressions that different communities will have to try to capture the essence. And I know that that's something that we all collectively as a parish really had to ask hard questions when we moved the liturgies to an online encounter. The church writ large was asking questions around what's essential as a liturgical act. If you can't replicate everything precisely, every jot and tittle, what's vital to conveying the mystery and the power of each of these liturgies? And so some of what I'm hearing is how different communities are doing that. Yeah. All right. Thank you all. Oh, yeah. At this exact moment, Mary Kat and I just kept our albs and our microphones on, because it's an incredibly tight turnaround between adult formation and the next liturgy. So this is just, we're still dressed, we're just not wearing our vestments. This is a time saver right here. Yeah. Yes. All right. Thank you all. Thank you all. Yes, we'll see you later today, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. All right.